I stood at the podium, the microphone in front of me seeming to magnify the weight of the moment. My heart beat rapidly, the words I had prepared echoing in my head. The wedding reception was in full swing, guests were chatting, the laughter and clinking of glasses filling the air. But I wasn't thinking about the celebration. I had one thing on my mind: this speech. It was time to expose the truth. As I stood there, taking a deep breath, my eyes scanned the room, making sure everyone was paying attention. My parents were seated at the table looking calm and detached, but I could see the slight tension in their posture. They didn't know what was coming. No one did. "I have something I need to share with you all," I began, my voice steady but firm. I could feel the room quieting, the guests sensing something significant was about to happen. My parents exchanged a confused glance, but I continued. "Today, I stand before you, not just as a bride, but as someone who has fought hard to overcome my past. And it's time for the truth to come to light." I paused, letting the weight of my words settle in the air. The murmurs started almost immediately. I could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on me. Some were curious, others were concerned, but I knew I couldn't back down now. This was the moment I had been preparing for my whole life. I cleared my throat and looked down at the letter I had written, the one I had been holding on to for years. It was more than just a speech. It was a release. A way to finally take control of my own story. My parents had always controlled the narrative of my life, but not anymore. "I know you all know me as a successful young author," I continued, my voice growing more confident. "What you may not know is that my debut novel was inspired by real-life experiences. Experiences that I've had to keep hidden for far too long." There was a collective gasp from the crowd. I saw some heads turn toward my parents in confusion. They didn't understand what was happening, but I was ready to reveal everything. I looked up from the letter and made sure my parents were watching me. My book, the one that won a Newcomers Award and became a bestseller, was based on my life. The protagonist, much like me, grew up mistreated by her parents, constantly told she was inferior to her sibling. My life, growing up in this house, was a nightmare. At that moment, the room erupted into murmurs. The crowd couldn't believe what they were hearing. I felt a strange mix of satisfaction and relief wash over me. It was happening. The truth was finally coming out. I saw my mother's face go pale as she realized what I was saying. "Violet, stop it," she cried out, but I ignored her, pressing on. "I was always the one left behind," I said, my voice now filled with raw emotion. "Whenever the family went out, I was left behind to take care of the house. I wasn't allowed to have a life, a future. And when I was 15, they threw me out of the house to live with my grandmother. That's when I really learned what it meant to survive." The room went silent. Everyone was hanging on my every word. I could feel the stares of my guests, the disbelief in their eyes. It was a moment I had dreamed of for so long, but it still felt surreal. My parents, who had always seemed untouchable, were now being exposed for who they truly were. They made me leave high school early, forced me to work and support their household while also taking care of my grandfather. My parents, they didn't even care. I paused, taking a deep breath. And now, after all these years, they have the nerve to show up here today, asking for money, for support. After everything they did to me, after everything they put me through, I will not be their daughter anymore. My voice was steady, but the anger I had carried for years was finally breaking free. My hands trembled slightly as I held the letter, the words on the page now feeling like a declaration of freedom. "I am done with them," I said, my voice ringing out clear and loud. I've held on to the hope that one day they would realize how much they hurt me, but that day will never come. They have no remorse, no understanding of the damage they've caused. So, from this point on, I'm severing all ties with them. I will not call them my parents anymore. Please go away, disappear from my life." The crowd was stunned. There was no more noise in the room, just a deafening silence. My parents were speechless. their faces a mix of confusion and anger. My mother opened her mouth to speak, but the words caught in her throat. "You're making a mistake," she finally said, her voice trembling. "We did everything for you. We gave you a roof over your head. We paid for your education." I couldn't hold back anymore. "No, you didn't," I snapped. "You only ever cared about how much money I could make for you. You pushed me into a career I didn't want. You made me sacrifice my dreams just so you could brag to your friends. That's not love. That's control." There was a moment of tense silence before my brother, who had been sitting quietly, stood up. His face was red with anger. "Enough," he said, his voice booming across the room. "Just stop it. You're lying. Don't try to manipulate her anymore." The shock on my parents' faces was almost comical. My usually calm brother Barton had never raised his voice like this before. But now, the anger and frustration he had kept bottled up for years came pouring out. "I had my own struggles too," he said, his voice shaking. "I wasn't treated any better. When Violet was kicked out, I wanted to leave with her. But Grandma stopped me, told me to stay and think about my future." Barton turned to face our parents, his expression hard. "You didn't care about anyone except yourselves. You made us both suffer, but we're done now. I'm done with you. And Violet is right. We're severing ties. You'll never manipulate us again." The room was in shock. My parents, who had once seemed so untouchable, were now being exposed for the toxic people they truly were. My heart pounded in my chest as I realized that this moment, this decision, was not just for me. It was for my brother, for anyone who had ever been abused by their family, for all the children who had suffered in silence. My mother's face twisted with fury. "You can't do this," she yelled. "We're your parents. We gave you everything." But my brother didn't flinch. "You gave us nothing but pain," he said quietly, his voice steady but firm. I looked at him, gratitude filling my heart. Finally, he understood. Finally, we were on the same page. The moment was heavy with emotion as my parents, humiliated and defeated, turned to leave. They ran toward the exit, their faces red with shame. Cameras clicked as the reporters, who had been discreetly observing, captured the entire scene. The backlash would be swift. It was clear now that my parents would never again be able to show their faces in public. I turned to my husband, who had quietly watched the whole scene unfold. His face was full of understanding and support. He smiled at me warmly, the kind of smile that made my heart swell. "You did the right thing," he said softly. "You freed yourself." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. The burden that had weighed on me for so long was finally lifted. I had taken control of my life, and now I could finally move forward, unencumbered by the past. It's been years since that day. My life has changed in ways I could never have imagined. I'm now a wife and a mother of 2 beautiful children. My husband, a kind and compassionate doctor, left his prestigious position at the hospital to run his family's clinic, giving him more time to spend with us. Together, we've built a home full of love and laughter. I still think about my grandmother often, the woman who saved me when I had nowhere else to go. She passed away last year, but the lessons she taught me live on in everything I do. She taught me to value myself, to never let anyone tell me I wasn't worth it, and to always fight for what I believe in. As for my parents, I hear from a trusted friend in the media that they've moved to a remote rural area, trying to live quietly after the scandal. They've lost the social status they once had, and it seems that the shame they brought upon themselves will follow them for the rest of their lives. But none of that matters to me anymore. I've built a new life, a new family, and nothing will ever change that. My past may have been painful, but it's no longer my future. Tomorrow is my grandmother's birthday, and we'll celebrate it with a special dinner. My children are already excited about it, and I know that with them by my side, I can face anything that comes my way. In the end, I've learned that no matter how dark the past may be, there is always a way to move forward. And I will keep moving forward, for myself, for my children, and for the family that has always supported me.